you, out of everyone I have interviewed so far, have really intrigued me in actually discussing this and learning more about the issue and your stance on the issue itself. So I want you just to give a brief statement on where you stand, why you stand there, and if you can, just a further outline on how you approach the argument itself.
Yeah, sure. So just to sum it up in a sentence, I support the pro-life view because, for one, the science of embryology establishes that from the earliest stages of development, all of us, including the listening audience, were distinct, living, and whole human beings. So we weren't part of another living human being, like, say, the skin cells on the back of your hand. We were already distinct, whole living members of the human family. We were members of the species Homo sapiens. And philosophically, the science says that we're distinct, living, whole human beings. Philosophically, there's no relevant difference between the adults that we are now and the unborn humans that we once were that would have justified killing us. Differences of size, level of development, environment, whether you're in the womb or out of the womb, and your degree of dependency on another human being are not good reasons to say that you could have been killed then, but not now. Now, in talking about being distinct, the listening audience can't see me do this right now, but I'm pinching the back of my hand, and I just sent 300 or 400 skin cells hurling to their deaths on the floor in front of me. Now, that doesn't mean I committed mass murder. Reason why is those skin cells are part of a larger human entity, me. They're not whole, distinct living entities the way all of us were when we were in the embryonic stage of our life, just like we're distinct, whole living human beings right now in the adult stage of life. So we're distinct, we're living in that we were growing, and dead things don't grow. And obviously we were human. We have human DNA and came from human parents, so we must be human beings. And lastly, we were whole in that everything that we needed to function as adults was already present. It just hadn't developed just yet. Now, that's what the science says. And in many cases, people will think they are objecting to the science, but in reality, they're making a philosophical argument. So philosophically, philosopher Stephen Schwartz has put together, he has summed up the differences that people, or the arguments that people will make, into a 4-letter acronym known as the S.L.E.D acronym. S.L.E.D stands for size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. And Stephen Schwartz says that none of those are good reasons to say that you could have been killed back then, but should be protected now. So size, yes, it's true. We're much larger now than we were as an embryo or a fetal human being. But since when does size grant us a right to live? For example, men are generally larger than most women, but that doesn't mean that men enjoy a greater right to life. Shaquille O'Neal is far bigger than Hillary Clinton. That doesn't mean he's more of a person because of it. Well, some would say he is more of a person, but size isn't the issue.
It's not the reason. He's more of a person.
Yeah. So size is obviously doesn't even come into play if we're thinking if it's wrong to beat a small child against a large child. Both of them have an equal right to not be harmed, regardless of what size they are. So size is not relevant. Level of development is not relevant either. Sure, we were far less developed when we were in the embryonic stage or the fetal stage, but we were also less developed when we were in the stage of life as a newborn. For example, say a 2-year-old girl is far less mature than maybe her 24-year-old mother. Her 24-year-old mother might have a college degree. She might speak a couple languages. She might have a good paying job, and she can understand complex issues like love, justice, and equality. And she also has a fully developed reproductive system. The 2-year-old girl has none of that, but that doesn't mean it's any more justifiable or any more right to kill the 2-year-old versus the 24-year-old. They both have a right to life, regardless of their level of development. The E stands for environment. Where you are has no bearing on who you are. Yeah, it's true. We were in a different environment back when we were within the womb, but your location doesn't determine your humanity. So, for example, I'm in the city of San Diego right now, but if I travel to, say, Washington, D.C., I travel a distance of hundreds to over 1,000 miles. I changed location, but I didn't change my moral status as a human being. For example, also, when I hopped in the shower this morning, I changed location, but I didn't stop being or start being me. So if changing location cannot determine what you are, then how does a journey of 8 inches down the birth canal transform a non-living, non-human, essentially blob of medical waste into a fully valuable human being we should care for and protect? If you're not already a valuable human being, you're not going to get there by changing your address. And finally, D stands for degree of dependency. Yeah, it's true. We were far more dependent on our mothers back then for our survival than we are now. But since when does dependency mean that somebody can kill you? My boss, Scott Klusendorf, has written an article called What the Walking Dead Can Teach Pro-Life Advocates. And he gives the example of Sheriff Rick Grimes, who wakes up in the hospital one day after the zombie apocalypse has already taken place and he's all alone. And my boss, Scott, likes to say, he goes, okay, imagine we change the story just a little bit. Everybody leaves the hospital except for one doctor, and Rick Grimes is still on life support at this point. Does that doctor, because Rick depends entirely on that doctor for his survival, does that doctor have the right to kill Rick Grimes in order to make the doctor's life easier? Well, we would all say no. So degree of dependency, and this is also where the viability argument comes in, and I suppose we'll talk about that a little bit when we get to the legal issue, but this is where the viability argument comes in. And to give a little thought experiment that actually Peter Singer, who is not pro-life, but Peter Singer gives an interesting thought experiment about this. He says, suppose you have a woman in the United States. She has access to the best possible medical care. She's 22 weeks pregnant, which is about the earliest age that a child can survive outside the womb with medical care. She gets on a plane at, say, LAX or San Diego International Airport and flies to a underdeveloped nation like, say, Haiti or Nepal or Zimbabwe, where the standard of viability is 38 weeks. Does the child in her womb start being a person at 22 weeks in the United States, become a non-person, non-human entity when she lands in Haiti, and goes back to being a human being again, a human person, when she lands back in LA or San Diego? It would obviously be ridiculous. So degree of dependency and viability is not a good reason to say you could be killed then but not now. The letters are size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. In the past, we used to discriminate on the basis of race, skin color, gender, ethnicity, or religion. Now we simply discriminate on the basis of size, level of development, location, and degree of dependency. We've basically just exchanged one form of bigotry for another.